Good evening, hello and welcome to this special broadcast. I'm Anusha Soni. Secularism is indeed part of the basic tenets of Indian Constitution. But what does secularism mean? Does it mean that government-run institutions cannot have any shred of cultural or religious element? Or does it mean that the decision-making process of courts, government-run bodies shall not be affected by religious ethos? Noted legal historian Abhinav Chandrachud in his research shows how the present-day Indian secularism is a colonial import, and post-independence, various facets of religion have become a part of our cultural practices within the government institutions and even laws. That leads us to the debate today. Haven't we all grown up celebrating Diwali and Christmas in our schools? The Saraswati Vandana or the Christmas carols have been a part of our growing up years in our educational institutions. But perhaps the politics of today has challenged these very basic notions. After the Karnataka Education Minister made a statement that Ganesh Chaturthi celebrations will be allowed in government schools, organizations like PFI have questioned the move, raking up the controversy of hijab. This entire controversy and all the arguments around it is our top focus tonight. Well, let's take you through the arguments on both the sides. What is it that the argument of the government is, or what the Education Minister has said, versus the arguments which various organizations like PFI are raking. First of all, schools are free to celebrate Ganesh Chaturthi because it's a cultural festival and something which has been done in schools for a very, very long time. The CFI has hit back. It has said that this is a bid to gain political advantage and trying to show the culture or the religious symbols of one religion over another. Celebrating Ganesh in school is something that is done every year, and this is an attempt to create unrest in the education sector. The PFI in fact argues that this is the same minister who made the statement and said that none of the religious practices are allowed in educational institutions. Same minister slammed the religious practices in educational institutions when the hijab row happened in the country, and not a religious program, it's a practice of uniting society. Often, it is very difficult in a country like India to separate the cultural argument from the religious argument. It's very deeply intertwined, and sometimes it's caught in the communal crossfire. Cutting across to my colleague Harish, who's joining us live, getting us more details on the story. Harish, first to establish the story for our viewers, there's no official circular that has really come out, but clarify 2 points. First, the context in which the minister made the statement, and what has been the general practice in state-run educational institutes when it comes to celebration of Ganesh Chaturthi? Was it always done?
Well, three crucial aspects here. Yeah. One, the state,
as you rightly mentioned, the state hasn't asked anyone to celebrate or not to celebrate. Some of them, including the SCPI, said that if while banning burqa, you said there should be no religious symbol within the school, then why are you letting Ganesh Chaturthi being celebrated inside the campus? The argument from the government is that we're not asking anyone to celebrate or stop it. And this is something that's happened for a number of years. And we do not see it as a religious event. We see it as a social event. We see it as a cultural event as well. And this has been used even during independence struggle to get people together. And we do not see it as a religious event. It's the argument coming in from the government. On the other hand, we've seen several schools having Ganesh Chaturthi for a number of years. Yes. Is it part of the academic activity? No. What happens is most of these schools are closed for a good 2-3 days during the Ganesh Chaturthi festival, and the school administration brings in a Ganesh Murti, and then till its visurgence, it's there in the school. And not everyone is forced to come in and celebrate. Some schools do have a congregation over there, and nobody has officially objected or raised the issues. The other counter argument coming in now is that there are several Christian institutions which also celebrate Christmas, and this is whether they are minority institutions or otherwise, some of them who are not minority institutions, but they also celebrate Christmas for a good 8 to 10 days in December. Should that be stopped? Where will this entire argument go? Will it open up a Pandora's box? So many saying that it would not be wise to go on something like this by SCPI or any other organization which have questioned this. The government so far not officially saying anything, but just maintaining that whatever has happened for the last few years will continue. we are in no mood to interfere in any manner.
All right, Harish, thank you so much for establishing that story. Harish has made some very important points. First, the government has not said to celebrate or not to celebrate. This has been a decision that the schools at the local level have maintained. This is not part of the academic calendar. The school administration usually brings in a pratima, does a stapna, and then the entire celebrations happen. Joining us on the broadcast are our panel of guests, Mr. Mohan Vishwa from the BJP, Ratan Sharda, who's an RSS researcher and author. We also have Sanket Yanagi, who's the spokesperson from the KPCC, and Mr. Syed Asad Abbas, who's a political analyst, is joining us on the broadcast. Mr. Mohan Vishwa, first to you. The argument that organizations like PFI are making is that if hijab was banned, why celebrate Ganesh Chaturthi? The minister said no religious symbols or any kind of religious things are allowed within the educational institutes. Ganesh Chaturthi is a religious festival. Respond to that.
See, Anusha, as Minister said, this is not happening from past 2 years or 3 years or rather 10 years. The first Ganesh Chaturthi celebration started in 1893 by Mr. Balagangadhara Tilak to fight against British, where, entire Hindu unity was required. See, if somebody is objecting for something which is done inside the home, we do agree. So we are talking of something which is a social celebration, okay? It's a social celebration. If somebody comes up tomorrow and say that they want to celebrate Krishna Janmashtami or they want to celebrate some, Sabrimala Swami Ayyappa Jayanti and all, then it will not be allowed, okay? Because those are the things which were never celebrated earlier. Please understand the intention behind it. And I have one question to the Congress or PFI, whoever. Since 1947 to 2022, we just now finished 75 years of independence celebration. Isn't this the same is celebrated under their government? Okay, where Mr. Siddaramaiah was, chief minister between 2013 and 2018. Even then, also it was celebrated in all the schools. Okay, and it is not mandatory. Our government has not issued any new circular or new notification, something like that. Okay, it's purely a social celebration. Please understand, it is no way connected to religious issue. Whereas hijab, what you're telling now, is a settled case. It is settled in High Court. They went to High Court and High Court gave a few direction. It's purely about uniform, which will be weighed by everybody on day-to-day basis.
Mohanji, I have one question to ask. Mohanji, please allow me an interjection. You're absolutely right when you pointed out that Ganesh Chaturthi and the manner and the fervor with which we celebrate it has links to our independence struggle. But one can't deny the fact that it has religious roots. It's a religious festival. You can't have a Ganesh Chaturthi celebration or the entire puja of a Ganpati without the Hindu rituals and rites. It's a Hindu festival.
See, Anusha, when I was also studying school probably 15, 20 years back, I have celebrated the same Ganesh Chaturthi along with my friends who were Christians as well as Muslims. That's the kind of irony we had when we were celebrating. It can be even Saraswati Puja also, when we worship Saraswati once in a year before the examination. So that is what we do. So these kind of things are happening irrespective of any religion or any social cause for that matter, for decades together or for centuries, I can say. Okay, this is purely a social event. So don't mix with any particular religious activity. As I will
bring in the Congress also into the discussion. Sanketji, the argument that the BJP is making is that hijab was a different matter. It was about uniformity in school educational institutions. There were norms that were prescribed by the government, and those norms and bylaws in various educational institutions had to be adhered to. This is something that the schools do at the local level. The government has not in any way facilitated it or stopped it. It's a cultural celebration that happens each year. Why bring in the entire angle of hijab into it? Please respond.
So the government and the BJP is blowing both hot and cold at the same time. In one way, when the hijab matter was being heard by the High Court before the full bench, the government took a stand that any school is not a place of worship, and it's only in educational institutions. Nothing would be permitted there. It is not to be considered as a place of worship, and no religious ceremonies or religious activities be conducted in any school. But now their stand is otherwise. So they may have to be sticking on to one point. Either it's a place of worship or a place of education. If they stick on to the point as already been considered by the High Court, saying that it is a place of education but not a place of worship, no religious activities be conducted in the school, no religious phenomenon should be followed in the school, then how can the government turn around and say that its stand is incorrect or it has got a different stand and it is
Okay,
trying to
let me take in a
run around
quick
its
word
own?
from Mohan Vishwa, then I'll go to other guests as well. Mohanji, is this an artificial distinction that you're drawing between cultural and religious festivals? You cannot deny Ganesh Chaturthi is a religious festival. You're also right that we have all grown up celebrating Christmas, Saraswati Puja and different kinds of festival in our schools, whether we studied in a minority institution or in a government-run institution. But it was the BJP itself that brought in this entire argument that you cannot wear a hijab or you cannot have any kind of religious symbols within the school premises. The matter went to the High Court as well. So now you are going back on your own argument. That's what Congress is accusing you of. Respond to that.
See, Anusha, this is the double standard of Congress. He has not answered my question. Between 1947 to 2022, they were the one who ruled the country the most. Why they were not opposed? Between 2013 to 2018, why the same Siddaramaiah government was not opposed? Aren't Congress Karyakartas celebrate Ganesh Chaturthi in their schools or in their colleges? Come on, it was happening in their regime also. Okay, now why they are questioning is just because, to get hold on one particular community vote bank. That's all. You take anything for that matter. In the case of hijab also, the circular was issued in 1980. The particular practice in Udupi school was there from 1986. And also there is a circular issued by the Congress government itself. So this is the double standard of Congress. Okay. Earlier they say one thing, later for the sake of vote, they reverse their own decision. So it clearly shows the double standard of Congress. And I don't think so Congress has any say on hijab because they have not clarified their stand even today on hijab. Today he is coming and talking here, but when you see their hijab discussions, when those proceedings were happening, they never had a clear stand on it. Okay, so even today I don't think they have a clear stand. So Congress should avoid this double standard, and they should have some sort of a clear stand on all these issues. Where we are very
Mr.
clear,
Ratan Sharda,
and this is practiced for centuries
Mr. Ratan Sharda and
Syed
Syed Asad Abbas, I'm bringing both of you into the discussion. Ratanji, first to you. The argument which is being rigged up also takes us to the cultural ethos that this country has known. All of us have grown celebrating all festivals. India is very unique in the fact that whenever it's a festival, we have believed in sharing happiness. The differences on festivals of whichever community somewhere is kept aside to celebrate collective ethos. Somewhere in this communal politics, it has become hijab versus Ganesh Chaturthi.
First of all, India is a religious country. Whatever you might say, Swami Vivekananda said, religion is the heart of this civilization. So we do celebrate. Secondly, we don't follow secularism of the Western world where we separate the church and the state. That is why we have a concept of Sarva Pantha Samadha Bhav. And that is how constitution makers did not put secularism word in the initial constitution, which was inserted in 78, now 76. Now, coming to more important point, are Muslims they stop from celebrating any festival? I already talked of hijab and Ganesh. That is very, very vacuous statement because hijab is the issue of school uniform discipline. Ganesh is a religious issue. Have Muslims may stop from celebrating any of their festival ever? I need to get an answer. Were they stopped from any festival? Hindus have been stopped. Navratri, Holi, Diwali, Dahi Handi. Every festival is being questioned. Every question being put curtailed. No other festival is curtailed. Muslims have 4 holidays out of 12 in the central calendar, and Hindus have only 2. Do we know that? Do people realize this? Then talking further, see, people who are not happy with Hindu customs, they wanted a separate country. They were given a separate country. We lost 1/3 of the land. 2 million people, 20 million dishoused. And now,
Mr. Sharda, my only request to you,
just a moment. No, this is a logical argument. Don't try to stop me, please.
No, I am not trying to stop you, sir. I am not trying to stop you. You don't even allow me an interjection.
Those who Muslims lived here knew that we are going to live together with Hindus. Those who don't like went to Pakistan. I am not saying anybody should go to Pakistan now. I am saying the price we paid for secularism should be honored. And let us all enjoy festivals. It's a cultural festival started by Tilak in way back, more than 100 years back. So why are we stopping it now? Every party celebrated it suddenly. We have told you become religious. You don't celebrate. You get questions. We will not allow any veto power.
But Ratanji, the argument which is being made on no, I don't have to like or dislike your statement. You are more than entitled to have your respectable views, and that's why we have called you on the panel. Syed Abbas, please come in on this point. This is a festival that has been celebrated for decades. This is not a new thing which is happening. Then why bring in a communal angle? The argument which is being made is that hijab pertained to a uniform. And uniform is something that was governed by the rules and regulations of the school authorities. This is not something which is part of an academic calendar and is in fact something which is done by the school authorities on a local level.
Anusha ji, the fact of the matter, we need to understand this. I come from a Christian convent, a missionary school, Cathedral High School here in Bangalore, where we celebrated Merry Christmas. Absolutely no problem. The prayer that we said was, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Later on, next, when I did my graduation, it was in a Hindu college, where we recited Om Bhur Bhurat Saha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Deva Sadimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. That is the Indian fabric. I agree with this point made by Ratan Shardaji very beautifully. Undoubtedly, Swami Vivekananda very beautifully said you cannot take away religion from India because at the heart, at the soul, at the core, we Indians are religious. Also, now getting straight to the point, Anusha ji, we need to understand, yes, it's beautiful. Ganesh Chaturthi celebration happens in my area, my society here in Bangalore, and I contribute to it. This is the ethos of India. I have absolutely no problem when any such celebration takes place. Also, as a matter of fact, we need to understand here. Now, let me come to the direct point. I do not abide by CFI SDPI, but my point is very simple. Mr. BC Nagesh, here of my state of Karnataka government, he made a statement categorically clear that no religious practice will be allowed in any educational institution. You ask me, I have no problem. But I question the BJP minister in power. But when you say, sir, your spokesperson comes out and says something which is so religious, he calls it social, which is not true. You ask me, yes, there must be a Christmas celebration. Yes, there must be a Ganesh Chaturthi. And yes, other occasions too, because it's beautiful. But when your own minister comes out and says, this is hypocrisy, this is double standards, what is religious is religious, do not paint it with saying by a social. That is the fact today.
All right. Going back to our political get, Mohan Vishwa and Sanket Yanagi, coming back to you, Mohanji. It's a very simple argument. I think the panelists broadly agree that India is a country where we have celebrated different festivals, and it has been largely the cultural ethos of this country. Why is it that the education minister made a certain statement when the hijab matter was going on and said that school is a secular institution, you cannot allow any kind of religious activities to take place? The criticism which is coming in for the BJP is that this is a religious festival which is happening in the school and you're denying the sentiments of one religion over another. That is what PFI has said in its statement. We tried to call them on the show. They were not, they didn't want to be a part of it, but their statement says that this is giving undue advantage to one religion over another.
See, Anusha, the problem here is or somebody, who just spoke just now, he should understand the difference between social activity and religious activity, okay? So when we celebrate as a group, it can be in the school or it can be in the road or it can be in the community. There, we never preach anything which is religious, okay? The devotees who comes over there, we never preach, we never say that, Hindu Dharma says this, Ganpati says this, you should follow this, you should follow that. No, that is called as religious activity. Please do understand, okay? But when we do in our home, when we worship the same Ganpati in the home, we'll be having a different procedure altogether, okay? This is a basic understand which he has to understand. If he's not understanding, probably he may have to do much more research and come back here, okay? So it's purely a social activity which is done for hundreds of years. And if now nobody has questioned till now when the Congress was ruling, okay, how come suddenly, this issue is coming up now? Okay. As I told you earlier, is just for the sake of getting a vote bank or pleasing one particular community.
Sanjayji, okay? if this entire festival and Ganesh Chaturthi was celebrated, yes, I'm coming to you, all yours. What I want to understand from you is that if this festival was being celebrated all along for decades in the country, why suddenly politics over it? Why is it that the Congress party is questioning the stand of the education minister?
So we are only saying that the government took a stand before the High Court specifically, even though we opposed it. The government took a stand that any cultural activity also which is associated with any religion should not be permitted. Any religious practice which is associated with any religion should not be allowed to be practiced in the school. Yeah. Any religious symbol, see, now hijab is a religious symbol according to them. Wearing a saffron shawl is also a religious symbol.
No, according to High Court, please.
And carrying any religious symbol, following any religious practice, so associated with any religious activities in the school are not the cultural activities alone, but they are religious practices which should not be allowed in the school. That was the argument advanced by the BJP-led government in the High Court. And now all of a sudden they say that they are trying to segregate cultural activity from the religious activity. But it is not that. They were unaware of all these arguments at that point of time. We have alerted them. If at all you are restricting one thing, it is going to have a long-term effect on other religious and other cultural activities also. We have warned the government. We had warned even the High Court, saying that, look, this is going to have a long-term effect on the culture of, our culture is, very wide culture, so many religions, we have to accept that. So even despite that, the argument advanced by the state is entirely different. They opposed any cultural activity, any religious activity, religious symbol, religious practice, or any cultural activity which is associated to any religion. In the name of a religion, they divided at that point of time. All of a sudden, they can't take a U-turn. For a moment, I am not opposing Ganesha festival. But the point is how the government is changing its stand from moment to moment. How the government is taking the stance.
Before I close in this discussion, Mohanji, are you changing your stand? Are you creating a politics that will give you some kind of political benefits, politics of polarization? That's what the Congress is accusing you of, that they are not opposed to any kind of celebrations of Ganesh Chaturthi or any other festival. It's just that you're selectively picking one over another, whatever suits your politics. That's what the Congress is accusing you of.
Anusha, hijab issue was not picked by us. Ganesh Chaturthi issue also is not picked by us. Okay, they themselves started in the case of hijab also. In the case of Ganesh Chaturthi festival also, there is no official circular, notification, nothing. What was followed till now for a century, the same thing will follow now. That's it. Who is doing politics here? They were the one who are doing politics. As I told earlier, it's purely politics. They want to do politics in each and everything. They don't want to have a proper harmony in the society. They need some sort of unrest in the society in the name of communal. So I don't think so, we have not created any issue of such kind.
All right, Mr. Mohan Vishwa of the BJP, Ratan Sharda, Sanket Yanagi, Syed Asad Abbas. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the broadcast. Well, the distinction for a country like India between what is cultural and what is religious is indeed a very, very difficult, and I must say an artificial distinction to make. And any kind of distinction of this nature is always going to arouse some kind of debate in the country. But the state of Karnataka, this is not the first time that we have seen this kind of polarized debate really emerging. Who can forget the entire controversy that had happened on the hijab issue? Let's take you through some key incidents that have happened. The 15th of August incident, where in Shivamogga, 2 people were stabbed amid tensions over Savarkar poster. Not to forget what happened on the 11th of August in Koppal. There were 2 people who were killed in communal clashes over interfaith relationships. Let's go back a little bit more. 26th of July in Bellar, BJYM workers Praveen Netaru's murder that had sparked tensions across the entire region, and you also had Section 144 that was imposed. June 18th, you had the Belagavi murder and communal clash over temple land. And on the 25th of May, in Malali, Bengaluru, you had row over temple-like structure in mosque. Section 144 was imposed. February, March, May, in multiple parts of Karnataka, we have seen like Udupi, Tumukuru, Bengaluru, tension simmered over hijab ban in educational institutes. For more than a week, the educational institutions in the state of Karnataka had to be shut down because there were protests that were happening by student bodies, the left and the right in different parts of the country. And in the middle of that entire hearing of the Karnataka High Court really happened. Talking about yet another row which has emerged in the politics of Karnataka. Not to forget that this state goes to polls next year. The Savarkar row continues. BJP workers gher out the car of the ex-Chief Minister Siddaramaiah, who was in Kodigu to take stock of the flood situation. They threw Savarkar's photo onto his cars, raised slogans. There were posters that went viral on social media that called him by different names. While they gher out Siddaramaiah's car, they brandished black flags and said, Savarkar over Tipu Sultan. This only points out how there is a clash that has existed culturally between these 2 icons. This comes days after clashes took place in Shivamogga after a Savarkar poster was put up. After this incident occurred, Siddaramaiah had asked why a poster of Savarkar was put up in a Muslim area. That only led to the political controversy further brewing up. My colleague Ritu is joining us on the broadcast, getting us more details on that story. Let me quickly try and connect with Ritu and get more perspective. Ritu, tell us about these protests that were done today and what kind of politics is Siddaramaiah facing right now after his statement over Savarkar's poster?
Yes, exactly. So the political drama here in the Karnataka continues. You see every day there are new twists and turns that is taking place for one or the other reason. And this is from the Kodagu that today where he was on a visit to take a stock of flood affected areas. That's when the BJP workers along with few Hindu organization workers, they tried gerawing the former CM's vehicle, and they also threw eggs in fact, and that's what has in fact angered the Congress workers, and they immediately rushed to the site, and they too started protesting right there for the kind of the slogans that were being raised against the former CM, as in the "Go Back Sidhu Khan" is the kind of a posters that also went viral, and the slogans too were being raised at the site, and that's where you see the Congress workers here in the Kodagu. They also reached the site and started protesting, where the SP had to come to the spot and then pacify both the workers. Now, but what happened with the Siddaramaiah also reflected on his son there in the Mysuru, where Yatindra Siddaramaiah, in fact, there also he is, sat on a dharna and raised slogans against the BJP workers. So that's the kind of the drama that took place on the ground. But meanwhile, if we see what kind of a statement that the former CM Siddaramaiah also stated for this, what exactly happened in the Kodagu with him, he says that this is all because the BJP knows that in the Kodagu too, in the upcoming assembly polls, BJP will be in the Congress party. In fact, will be winning from the constituency, and this is something that is fearing in the BJP workers because they haven't taken up development works properly in the Kodagu district. Thus, because he was just not there to take a stock of the affected areas from the flood, but also to look up to the development projects, which for Congress, in fact, is alleging that the BJP party has failed to do it in the Kodagu.
Well, what we have seen is that this entire controversy of Tipu Sultan versus Savarkar and the manner in which the Congress party and including Mr. Siddaramaiah they made that statement has only led to protests further intensifying.